a half-human, half-dog ninja, a bunny girl piloting a giant mech, a child prodigy that wears a swimsuit and takes after the school of Zangief. This is what you can expect from Arcana Heart 3 Love Max, the recently ported game by Arc System Works to PC. Can this enhanced version of the original 2009 game for $30 do enough to secure a victory in the wallet of fighting fans? Before I answer that question, this key was obtained from strangely compelling public relations. That will not affect the opinion of the game in the end, but you should know the details for good measure. So what does the game have to offer? Let's start off with the modes here. There's a story mode that's unique for each character but tied together in a couple of ways. However, the game also includes an after story mode for a more light-hearted tale to counter the more serious, and I use quotes there, tale that the story mode plays out. Of course, there's your typical other modes, a training mode, a versus mode, an online mode. There's also a trial mode that you have to do specific actions in order to succeed, like specific aerial attacks, for example. The collection here for a fighting game is solid, and I especially do like the trial mode. I love modes that throw specific objectives at me, and in particular, try to train me into what the game is trying to do. As for the story mode, it's an extension of the main story series. 2 months after Angelia Avalon attempted to use a dimension distortion above Kanto, Japan, several factions still are at play, as the Drexler organization is added again, opening dimensional rifts pretty much all over the place. And of course, the Sacred Maidens and the Valkyries have come to stand up against the new threats that are playing out. Celestial Stones begin to appear, and everyone, and I mean everyone, is wanting to get their hands on them. Some want them because of power, others for possibly making their wishes come true. All in all, it's a typical fantasy plot you'd expect in a story mode like this in the genre. It's not anything to write home about, unfortunately. It's what you would expect, and it doesn't ever live up to, let's say, Mortal Kombat 9-like story elements. But it does the job alright compared to others, like in the cases of Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear. There's enough intrigue from the different characters that you'll want to see what they have to go through, and what part they play in the story. But if you're able to defeat the Guardian in the story mode in question, then what's the reward for all your hard work? Another critical fight? Unlocks of extras? No. Even better. Extreme cooking action. Okay, obviously some of the endings are a little bit silly, let's just put it that way. But honestly, it works for this game. It does seem a little bit strange at times, but it actually works compared to what the character is, what they're trying to do, and what they hold dear. But let's get into the base of the gameplay here, because it's probably why you're here. It's a fighting game, so if you played one, you've played a good amount of them. And a lot of the mechanics that you would expect from the genre are here in Arcana Heart. Combos, mix-ups, super jumps, there's a core expectation from the fighting genre that you can expect in this game. Certain elements come in over and over again, especially from the Japanese-like ones in Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear. Yeah, I'm comparing it to that a lot. There's nothing too crazy in terms of the mechanics here, nothing that completely turns the genre on its head, however, it does have a unique mechanic or two. Now there's combos of course, but there's also proration of the damage as the combo gains numbers, so you won't get one hit comboed in most cases. For those unaware of what this is, or in case I completely botched this pronunciation, that means that as combos go on, damage scales downward for every successful hit. Sure, combos can do a significant amount of damage, but they aren't death sentences, and you can get through fights in a variety of ways. That's why I have some problems with some of the other games in the genre, like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, despite how fun it is. Aggressive, defensive, zoning, every kind of strategy can work in this game from what I see. I'll give the game credit. Even though that this is a couple of versions after the original release of the game, they've been able to really optimize the game's balance in the end. I felt that although certain characters definitely seem more powerful than others at times, that given time, each character can have a reasonable chance against another, provided that they don't necessarily choose the wrong elements going into the fight, as I will allude to later on. The homing mechanic is one of the most important features of the game. The idea is that using the button, you can speed toward your enemy and close the space between you, but there are ways to use it to get away from your enemy quickly as well. Now this keeps the action up. It keeps the speed of the game up, but can be easily punished if not careful, and also can be cancelled and comboed into. Once I learned how to really use it, I found myself relying on it a hell of a lot in all forms. It is probably one of the critical cogs in the game's arsenal. And the staple in the fighting series, you do have a meter, known as the Arcana gauge, which is used to hit supers and cancels of various sorts. Now, it does work slightly differently here than other games, however, and I did like this variation. You'll notice the bar is green at the moment. With every hit on the opponent or hit taken while green, your maximal usable gauge increases. Once you use your gauge, however, that section of the gauge will turn red, and at this point you won't gain any maximum gauge going forward. You basically will have to wait until the red section is depleted. After time, it will recover on its own. Now, the longer you wait to use your meter, the better you are in the match. And this does change the dynamic a tiny bit, because you have more to work with. Holding back for getting more meter to work with is a viable tactic, and it adds a risk and reward mentality to the fights that I really do appreciate. Now look, I've never been a fighting game master or even good at fighting games, and this may pale in comparison to other games in the genre. But I found myself enjoying the implementation, as I felt it played towards smart aggression. You could pick your spots and be highly aggressive, but punished you if you got too reckless with it. That technical precision in terms of combos could still be overcome if you really think about smart play. Luring your opponent into using their meter early could actually work. Character variety, well, it's all over the place, and that's a good thing. Not just in the characters' attitudes, personas, or even the sheer wackiness they can bring to the table, but their fighting styles as well. You will get the feeling at times, however, that the characters may have been influenced by games of the past, as certain moves will seem awfully familiar in the long run. Yes, I'm letting this play for a specific reason. Not to say it doesn't work. I find myself drawn to characters like Lilith, for example, with her screen maneuverability and overall different style, for example. Sort of like a hit and run kind of style, but also keeping the opponent off guard. Now, even if you box in characters to certain aggressive or defensive or zoning-like play styles, you'll still find that there's reasonable variety within the core of the gameplay and within each core of the character. They can play a lot differently just for one character by themselves. Certain characters have unique mechanics to them, like reloading 3 bullets that can extend combos, or having a specific extra gauge, and movesets wouldn't be the only thing that keep these characters apart. But the characters are not the only selection that you'll have to make in battle. You'll have to take the Arcana with you in battle. Now, Arcanas are your enhancers and partners in battle. Now, there's an Arcana that's the default for each character that fits the storyline, but for certain modes, and in particular with verses, of course, you can mix and match. And just like the choice of your character, choosing an Arcana based on your playstyle is rather important. It adds a bit of strategy to characters, similar to the Mortal Kombat 10's variation system we saw earlier this year. First of all, Arcana will mess with your character's base stats. They have star ratings for strength and defense, and will add or take away based on that rating. Arcana like the Earth Arcana are defensive powerhouses, but they'll drag down your strength. While you actually have Arcana that actually negatively impact both your stats, like the Wind Arcana. But it's then countered by the abilities that the Arcana can add to your characters. See, Arcanas can give your characters new abilities or new attacks that can help complement a character's playstyle or deal with their weaknesses. For example, Partinus, the Arcana of Love, can reduce falling speed after a double jump, for example. For characters who like to take to the air, that can really help in terms of maneuverability. Or the Wind Arcana, which I will not attempt to pronounce because I keep on failing at it, can add an advancing guard to your moveset. It's why the Wind Arcana seems to be a favorite despite it negatively impacting your character and stats just from that ability alone. They can also give your characters new attacks that you can combo into if you can really take advantage of what they have to offer, like the Luck Arcana. Now, it's definitely worth experimenting with, and you can definitely get a lot of combinations going. Just sort of playing around with the game and seeing what you can do is sort of half the fun. Now, there are difficulty settings for the AI, and in verses that works rather well. Now, in the story modes, that's a different story. See, in the story modes, in terms of variation from the first fight to the last fight, it's huge. In the first fight, I can nearly perfect it every single time. But by the end fight, I'm getting my ass handed to me over and over and over again. 62, by the way. It took me 62 times to attempt to beat the last Guardian with Konoha in order to get her ending. Now, while I understand that bosses are supposed to be hard, some of the skill sets in order to be able to get through this boss was a little bit weird. The fact is, I couldn't use all my skills. Some of them wouldn't hit, some of them wouldn't be able to be used that I was counting on from before. I hate bosses like this. In particular, I almost threw my controller in frustration a couple of times last night in order to finish this review. Because on 3 separate occasions, I was able to get it within an inch of health only to fail because of, well, shenanigans, let's say. Honestly, I almost threw my controller at the screen at that point. I went to bed. I was able to defeat it after a while. It seems like the variation should have been tightened up a bit, especially if the difficulty setting came into play. As to the netcode and network gameplay, it's a mixed bag at the moment. And by mixed bag, I mean, let's talk about the netcode. It seems to be pretty damn well put together, at least in what I've experienced so far. The matches that I did have seemed to go smoothly with minimal problems, and I never felt it hindered me in the slightest. I was still enjoying myself despite getting my butt handed to me by a certain Elsa player. I got 1 round victory. I feel accomplished against that player. It's just that, well, no one's playing. It's an older game on a newer platform, and the player base, it ain't there yet. Which is really a shame in the end, as it really does play smoothly overall. But it also created a bit of this problem. The problem that I've run into, yeah, the people that I'm playing, they definitely have played the game a lot before. These aren't new players to the franchise, they're experienced veterans, and needless to say, it creates quite a skill gap overall. Now look, this is somewhat to be expected sadly, with an upgraded version of an older game to a newer platform. However, the fact of the matter is that trying to find somebody of my equivalent skill level online right now is not going to happen. As for the presentation, we start to see a bit of the cracks in the armor here. Now look, it's not like the game is ugly. There are some great drawings in the story cutscenes, and the character models do bring the characters' unique aspects out rather well. I like the characters' designs. The designs are silly, but frankly pretty fun in all areas. While you get some standard tropes that you'd almost expect out of the genre, they've got a little bit of a twist to them to change it up a tiny bit. But in the end, the game sprites do show their age in battle. I wish they had gone over an HD restoration or something along that line. I feel like, yes, it is a port. This could have gone a long way to make the game stand out in the PC space. When you compare it to games like Skullgirls, for example, it's hard to sit here and justify what's happening on screen in terms of visuals. Sadly, it lacks. The voice acting here seems to be good. Well, it's Japanese though, so I can't technically tell you how good it is. It seems to match the tone of the English portion on the screen, in the best way that I can tell, but I don't know Japanese, alright? I know it sounds like what I would expect, but I'm a sucker for any type of voice acting, even if it's bad, so take that with a grain of salt. As for the music, well, here's the thing. With games like this, you want the music to be upbeat and everything, and the thing is, I think it does work. However, I find this to be very, very subjective, so let me play a couple of sample tracks for you to see if it's up your alley. One last note here, however. There are some signs of a lack of polish here, as well as lacking of certain testing criteria functionality-wise regarding the game. Day one, the game didn't have a control stick as an option for control input with the Xbox 360 controller. Needless to say, characters that require 360-degree inputs, how is that not a thing? But it has been added, so that's a good thing. But there are still menus where the stick input doesn't work with the 360 controller, and it causes a little bit of a problem. And it's very annoying, to be quite honest with you, especially when some menus actually do work with it. The UI and extra modes can be annoying too. I would have liked to see these bars on the side really be eliminated, but I understand that to a certain extent. But here, why is the description taking so much of the screen up here? The fact of the matter is, it could have been minimized in terms of the information on screen, and it wouldn't be taking up half the screen. I know it's transparent, but it's still unnecessary. There's really not a lot of reason for it. Arcana Heart 3 Love Max keeps the core fighting intact. and those who may not have been able to play the Arcana series will find a good core fighting game here. There's a lot of variety under the hood in terms of combat, and frankly, it has a good core single player experience to grab your attention. But like other re-releases, don't expect too much from the multiplayer at this time due to the lack of player base, which will hopefully build up but isn't impressive at this point. The game in the end gets a solid 78 on my buyability scale, meaning that if you're really hurting for a title, especially a fighting game, pick it up. Otherwise you can wait for a sale in this case. But that does not include the enhancers with my review system, as you can see linked here. Add 6 to the game if you're a fan of past fighting game story modes like BlazBlue and Guilty Gear. Now the characters are interesting, the premise of the story is fun, and frankly it's just a good time overall with the regular and especially the after story modes. I just found myself having fun and wanting to play through each story for the sake of finding out what came of the character and their ending. And of course the baking scene, because that's just freaking hilarious. Take away 5 points if network play is critical for you. Again, I want to reiterate something here. I've had no issues with network play in terms of performance. It's just a very limited base of people to work off of in terms of who I can fight, and that hurts it a bit. And if you're planning on playing for the sake of playing, realize that your competition is, well, rather strong. And so take another 5 points off if you want a casual network fight. All the people that I faced, yeah, they're rather talented. I mean, not a good fighting game player myself, even in Skullgirls I wouldn't say I'm the greatest, and I played the most in that game, but Jesus Christ, I was being nailed left and right here. Granted, I'm not very good at the game, but I feel like these guys, yeah, they know what they're doing to such an extreme level. Add 6 to the game if you like experimenting with mechanics and playstyles. Here's the thing. There's so many combinations of arcanas and characters and the way you can play. Just playing around with them and seeing what you can do is actually rather fun, and in fact is probably one of the biggest strengths of the game. Now, granted, there are always going to be mechanics that seem to work better than others, but even choosing a mechanic that may not be as good can keep things so fresh that people who have gotten so used to the game can really deal with you in weird ways. Once again, this is Dragnix, and I thank you for watching this review. If you liked what you saw and thought it was useful, hit that like button and share the video with a friend or two. If you have any feedback or have any questions about the game that I covered, leave an opener in the comments below. And if you want more supers like this review on gaming coverage, hit that subscribe button to help me make a career out of this. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more extreme baking action. I won't go too overboard with jokes, guys, but I can have my fun. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.